Hello guys, welcome again for another round of reading. We can tell that we're in reading because our background is yellow. Also, when we come down here, we can see the icon of the book. We are doing week 2 now, lesson 3, and today's date is 11/24. Currently, I do not know how many videos this is going to be, but I can probably predict that there are going to be 3 videos. So you will need to watch all of them and do them in order with the Edpuzzle. Let's go ahead and move on to slide 2. Taking a look at our objective. So go ahead and read it aloud while I read it aloud. Understand and summarize reading by responding to who, what, when, where, why questions and drawing quick visuals. Again, remember there are 2 parts. Part 1, you're going to respond to your question words. Part 2, you're going to draw quick visuals. Okay? Let's move on to the essential question. So before we get started on our reading today, let's reflect on the essential question. How can other perspectives help us evaluate the world? So I want you to think from yesterday's reading about Gold Country. How has your perspective changed? So using your answer frame, from yesterday's reading about Gold Country, my perspective has changed because, and you'll pause the video and go ahead and say your response aloud. Okay, moving on to our inferences. So based on the pictures, what can you infer? We would do a picture walk, walking through the text, looking at the different pictures, but I placed a few. So using your answer frame, you're going to respond, I can infer that because, go ahead and pause the video and answer the questions. All right, a little bit of vocabulary that we'll introduce before we read is first, ushered. We can see that it's verb because it's coded in red, which means to show or guide someone somewhere. So we have this man and he is showing and guiding people to the aisles. Next word is welling, which again is also a verb. It is highlighted in red, which means to be crying with pain, sadness, or anger. Next word is relieved, no longer feeling stressed or nervous. Maybe take a second to think about a time when you felt relieved. Using the answer frame, a time that I felt relieved was when, pause the video and make sure you respond to the answer frame. Okay, and the last vocabulary word is justice, which is a noun, so it should be actually colored black. Go ahead and make our quick change, which means the just or fair behavior or treatment. So oftentimes we see that it is portrayed or showed with the balance. So hopefully if something is just or fair, we look at both perspectives. So we look at Jesse's perspective and your perspective. If you were in an argument, we would look at both sides and it would be fair. We're not going to listen to just what Jesse says and not what the other person says or what you say. Alrighty, getting into the guided practice, so the we do part. We're doing similarly what we did yesterday, but this time we're going to read a new text called Justice in Eatonville. Again, we're summarizing and we're drawing quick visuals. Keep in mind the justice icon making connections to that visual. When you are finished, you will have the same independent questions, your who, what, when, where, and why questions. I'm not going to review them now as we discussed it yesterday. Please remember that you will annotate with quick visuals to summarize, and we're going to highlight who, what, when, where, why questions, answers to the questions. Please remember it's not an art lesson. Your objective is to be able to draw the visual, so let's quickly get through it. Okay, we're going to go ahead and start into the text. So I'm going to toggle over to my document camera. Okay, looking at our title, I've selected my annotating tools. I've chosen to use an orange highlighter, which is what I will use to highlight my who, what, when, where, why. Who, what, when, where, why, answers. This will help us in order to write our introduction paragraph, which we will do later on today during our mini writing lesson. All right, Justice in Eatonville. So we can go ahead and we see that Eatonville is a proper noun because it's capitalized. That tells us our where. An excerpt, remember that just means a short bit, from Zora and Me by Victoria Bond and T.R. Simon. Zora and Me 2010 is a fictional account of the early life of Zora Neale Hurston, 1891 to 1960. That's when she was born and that's when she died. The African-American author, anthropologist, and folklorist. Hurston was a prominent figure of the Harlem Renaissance and renowned as a great storyteller. Zora and Me takes place in Eatonville, Florida. Well, we have a little bit more information of the where. And we can go back and we can also see the who. So we have Zora Neale. We have Zora Neale, who is Zora Neale Hurston. That gives a little bit more information who she is. We can see another bit of information who, well, she's African American. And we see that she was an author, an anthropologist, and a folklorist. Let's go and figure out where we are at. The first incorporated African American town in the United States, where Hurston grew up. The novel was narrated or read by Zora's friend Carrie. Follows two fourth grade girls, another who, and their friend Teddy, as they attempt to solve a murder mystery. A little bit more about our what? In the excerpt from chapter 25 of the novel, Zora and Carrie confront Joe Clark, the town sheriff, and the owner of the general store. So we know that Joe Clark is another character, and he's the owner of the general store. The girls tell him what they suspect about the incident and the people involved. Gold, a beautiful woman who comes back to town on the arm of a white suitor. Ivory, a turpentine worker who arrives one day in search of gold. And Mr. Pendier, an elderly man whom Zora believes to be half gator and half man. So in this first paragraph, we're introduced to a lot of the characters that we will see in the text from Zora and Me. So we have Gold, which is a person, a beautiful woman. We have Ivory, who is a turpentine worker, Mr. Pendier, and he's the old elderly man who seems to be half gator, half alligator, and half human. So for our quick visual that we can draw off to the side, there are many things that we can draw here. I'm going to go ahead and draw the characters because I really think we need to make connections to who they are so that they stay with us in our neurons throughout the whole text. So first we have Zora. And remember, she's a fourth grade girl. We don't know exactly what she looks like. I'm going to give her some hair though, assuming she has some. So there's Zora. And her friend Carrie. Both are fourth grade. About the same age as a lot of you. Okay, and they also have a lovely friend named Teddy. All three of these guys are trying to solve a murder. So they go to Joe Clark, who is the sheriff. And I'm just going to draw a star that says sheriff. And that's Joe. So they go to him to try and tell him what's up. Okay, and they start to suspect certain people. So the certain people they suspect are, number one, they have Gold. Number two is Ivory. And number three is Mr. Pendier. Okay, remember Mr. Pendier is half human, half alligator. I'm not going to try and draw an alligator, but you're welcome to draw an alligator. I'm just going to, well, here he is. Okay, there's a tail and he has legs. So he's half man, half alligator. Ivy is a turpentine worker. Or excuse me, Ivory, not Ivy, but it could be Ivy. And then Gold is a beautiful woman. Okay, again, she has the same hair, but she's beautiful. All right, let's go ahead and get on into the story. That gives us a little bit of an overview of the story so we know what we're going to read. The following afternoon, we went to Joe Clark's store. We knew we had a mission, and we knew we couldn't breathe a word about it. Okay, what? They're going on a mission. I thought about Gold. No matter how bad she felt now, she couldn't change what happened. Something happened. When we got to Joe Clark's store, the usual cast of characters stood on the porch interrupting one another. Mr. Clark was leaning against the post as usual, but he didn't look right as rain. He leaned like a powerful tree, taking a long overdue rest. The look in his eyes was far from peaceful. So we have Mr. Clark and far from peaceful. Okay, so I'm just going to draw to help me remember the main idea of this paragraph. We've got Mr. Clark. Remember, he is the sheriff. And I'm just going to kind of put a neutral, like he's looking off at someone, but he's not peaceful. Let's go on and turn the page. Moving on to page 13. Zora spoke. "Can I talk to you, Mr. Clark?" The chorus went silent. "Course you can," he said. He seemed to welcome the distraction. "Don't do it, Joe," someone called out. "They only want to take you for more licorice." Licorice is candy. "No, we don't," Zora said calmly, that Mr. Clark could tell she was dead serious. He ushered us to the store and led us to the small office in the back. Remember, ushered means to guide. So he walked them back to the store and showed them to the office room in the back. The desktop was covered in papers, receipts, bills of lading, and long sheets of numbers in rows. I looked at the shiny varnished legs of the desk. They held the shape of sturdy branches. Okay, we need to write a little bit to help us make connections in our brain as to what it is we read. Okay, so I'm going to draw just a little desk, and I know in here we have Mr. Clark, and remember he is the store owner and the sheriff. Then we have the two girls, Zora and Carrie. Okay, in the room there's tons of papers. It's kind of a mess is what it sounds like, and they want to talk about something. Zora dove into the conversation like skipping rope. She just jumped right in. "I overheard you talking with Gold about the loving pine." So we've got another proper noun here, and we can tell by looking at the word that both of the letters are capitalized. So I'm going to go ahead and put that as a what, and maybe we'll highlight a bit of Gold. Remember, Gold is a who. Mr. Clark stared at Zora for a moment. Taken aback, "What'd you say, child?" And we also have a visual already down here, which is interesting because that's very close to what I drew. Ding, ding, ding. We're on paragraph 13. We can tell it's a new paragraph because there's an indent. Indent means to go over. About 5 spaces, 5 letters or characters. "I heard you and Gold talking in the woods on Tuesday." So we've got a when. And who again? "We went to see her in the evening to tell her Ivory had been looking for her. We wanted to help lay his spirit to rest." Zora looked at Mr. Clark. He was still just staring at her. She pressed on. "Then Gold starts wailing and tells us how jealous her white man is. That white man she goes with to Lake Maitland." Zora paused. "She thinks he killed Ivory." Joe Clark was at a loss for words. Zora, sensing his shock, talked more and faster. Okay, going back, and let's go ahead and draw a quick visual to summarize what we've read. Sometimes when we read, we might not understand, and as a good reader, we should go back and reread. So I'm going to go ahead and reread from paragraph 13. "I heard you and Gold talking in the woods on Tuesday. We went to see her that evening to tell her Ivory had been looking for her. We wanted to help lay his spirit to rest." Zora looked at Mr. Clark. He was just still staring at her. She pressed on.